Hi, I'm Dr. Emily Friedman. I continue to gather my parties and vlog about it here, and I don't think we've ever talked about the reason why this series is plural rather than singular. And this is a good week to talk about it. A week where I've really been thinking about how the greatest Matthew Mercer effect is about the friends we play with along the way. Here's what I mean. I have a home game group, a D&D group of over a decade. And as I've talked about before, they're where I started trying to get folks to play new and different role-playing games. And I saw some success, but not a whole lot. It wasn't until I started to create a more intentional gaming group and kind of do some quick tasting, we might think about it as speed dating of people and games, that I started to see something beautiful coalesce. We're in the second month of this great experiment, and I think it's going really well. But it is revealing one of the challenges that I think a lot of people face when they're playing with their friends and are kind of coming to the idea that you can train a group into playing any kind of game. And that if you can just pitch it in the right way or, get people enough experience that they will be ready and eager and comfortable to play just about anything. And that, my friends, is a lie. And I I'm trying to figure out whether I believed it or not. I do believe that there is a space in the hobby that's really important and fruitful where we have open tables and open chairs. This is the Festival model I learned from my friend Evan Torner through events that we have organized with people who've never met before. And we saw that amazingly kind of work out both in my classroom and in our open gaming night at Auburn University this week, playing the same game, The King is Dead, a game that I then ran or facilitated its GM list with my home game last night, and we debriefed. And it worked really well. The King is Dead is a little bit more structured than Under Hollow Hills presents in Dreaming Avalon. That's much more freeform. If all you're in is for role playing and kind of playful character exploration, like one of my friends in my game group, you're going to prefer in Dreaming Avalon. The key is that your players do need to buy in, at least a significant number of them, to the idea that your players are going to want their characters to fall in love. So it's a flirty energy. And one of the things is that, we did not run that for my students, either publicly where people were meeting for the first time or in the space of my classroom, even with me kind of on the sidelines. That's an ask. And we can talk endlessly about the kind of cultural challenges of why do we imagine violence being more comfortable for us to do together in those kinds of spaces than romance, to say nothing of sex. Dylan Apellion has been talking about how he has new games, and Plus One XP has a new series on adult content. And those are really generative and important discussions. Shawang Biswas has talked about this in an academic adjacent context. He is an academic and game designer and is working in those kinds of spaces and thinking about adult content in all kinds of ways. There is a generative space for this, but I'm here. I'm with the people that I'm with, and I have players for whom this is not their bag. And one of the things that I wanted to use in Dreaming Avalon to get us to talk a little bit about kind of in our debrief is, do we see that as a hard line? Is that something that we're trying to experiment more with? Where are the kind of places for growth versus the places for boundaries? Because that will determine what games we play, right? And I can push on something that people want to grow in, but I'm going to honor a boundary. And it was interesting to use the occasion of playing The King is Dead after most of us played in Dreaming Avalon. because structurally they're very similar. They're both about mini games. They're both quick character creation. This was my character sheet for In Dreaming Avalon. My name, my house, and my attractive qualities as determined by me and the people next to me. That's all you need to get started. And then you use a deck of cards, and all of the games are about either developing the relationships, the alliances, the enmities, all of these kinds of things between the characters and understanding those, discussing motivations in the kingdom, but also collecting different cards. You really want to have as many face cards by the end as possible, because that's where your power and your ability to be crowned lies. And so each of the games has a way for cards to get swapped, cards to get battled over, cards to be earned and won, and also for you to sneak a peek at people's cards. And so it is really player versus player all the way to the end, because if you have twos and jacks, that's not adding to your power to ascend the throne. It's your power of the story to inflict doom on whoever did win. And that's where I had cards in spades, so to speak. So we had structurally two games that people really enjoyed. We could have, and someone was discussing about how we could play this in campaign mode across several evenings, slowly building up power and alliances, really leaning more into role playing and all of those sorts of things, getting to know how our characters ticked. I can imagine a scenario where we set up a group chat and people start building alliances if we played this for a month. That's super cool. And I love that we were talking about that as a very real possibility. But part of me was also like, well, there are games in The King is Dead that are very similar to In Dreaming Avalon that we didn't touch. And I don't know that we would, at least this particular group. So, for example, there's a game that has nothing to do with the cards and everything to do with two players' relationships to one another. A dance kind of bridges that in different kinds of ways. When we did do that, a reunion allows for a kind of discussion as a kind of chance meeting, but stealing time together is really intending on the specifics of touch, or at least the narrativizing of touch and intimacy and trust and all of those sorts of things in interesting kinds of ways. And this is when I remind my players in the debrief that this is by the same people who made Apocalypse World, a game that has special moves, that sees every part of humanity as fair game for exploring the ways that we connect to one another, including sex. And so it was really, really startling to them. This was a today I learned for them in many cases. And it meant for the start of a conversation, because there are games that follow in that tradition or that are part of other kinds of traditions that are also going to potentially include that kind of content. And it's not necessarily explicit. It can be fade to black, but if you're not even willing to imagine the possibility between characters, then we have a different kind of gaming table. And so that's a limitation. It's a very different kind of limitation than my friends who are only tactics nerds at the D&D table. And we work with that because I enjoy playing with my friends. And there might be smaller subsets within this group. We've still got a healthy number of folks who may have different kind of lines or boundaries or curiosities. And those may develop over time. I'm keenly aware that some of them watch this. So, hey, this is what's next in the conversation at some point in the future, right? We also have married couples. We have people who are in different kinds of relationships to one another. So that's also part of the deal. And so I've been talking to a friend of mine a colleague who's getting super into LARP and getting really excited. And like one of the things that they talk about is that LARP really loves a newbie. right? And they were like, oh, it's all about being untrained. And I'm like, is it? Or is it that like the training is coming from theater kids and it's not, and we're not having to do this kind of breakdown of expectations from D20 games, right? One. Two, the other part of that scenario is at a LARP event that you might travel for or participate in at a con versus a parlor LARP, you also have, these are people who are brought together in this moment in time. They are they can be trained in a culture of safety and respect and all those sorts of things, and you're never going to see them again. So you can take risks. You have that ingrained alibi. And the only way you replicate that at home is to have people who are on the same page about playing the same kind of intensity and a kind of trust and intimacy that you almost have to go to the completely other end of the spectrum in terms of familiarity and even to pull off. And I'm playing with people who I've played with for a decade. I've known for a decade and a half. But sometimes, and I think we don't talk about that enough, that can be a stumbling block too. It's all a personality thing. It's all a question of not just your experience in games, but how do you see what it means to role play? And that's not necessarily just taught to you by games, but it is part of it. And it's something that we're facing at this moment, and you might face as well. I think you can get up to this kind of speed much more quickly if you have those kinds of ego shedding experiences that come with theater. But hey, guess what? I have a trained professional actor, and he's one of the people who's having the hardest time. Several of my players who are expressing kind of hesitancy have a lot of acting experience under their belt and do this stuff professionally or publicly in all kinds of ways. So that's not a quick and easy answer to how do you build a game group that can go to this place. I don't know the good answers, and I'm guessing that a few of the people who are regulars here may have some interesting thoughts to contribute in the conversation, either here on YouTube or over in the free discussion on my Patreon, which is free to subscribe. You know the drill. It's just another place to safely talk about this stuff. And it is something that I think I'm going to be thinking a lot about because, you know, I'm teaching Die in a few weeks, as I have before, and I'm writing about Die. And Die is thinking a lot about the game groups that we come together with as teenagers, which are this particular kind of cocktail of hormones and intensity and dramatic and far fewer protective layers a lot of the time, or different kinds of protective layers. And Diloaded is thinking about the game group that comes together by chance, which I find deeply fascinating and, of course, have on my mind. That's how Kieran Gillen and I met, is in this kind of betwixt between sort of way. So, yeah, so I'm thinking a lot about what does it mean to make a game group in a small-ish college town community in this kind of way where we want to meet people where we are. And there's a lot on my shelves that maybe they're convention games. Maybe they find a different home. I don't know yet, but I'm going to keep playing to find out. I hope this was useful. I think it's a lot to chew on for all of us. See you soon.